Okay, so this is the public land protocol. And let's see, let me pull up my other screen over here. So first I want to start with a little bit about me. My name is Joe Nisbet and I'm a landscape architect. I've been doing permaculture design for about 6 years. I got my bachelor's in urban planning at Florida State University and master's in landscape architecture and community planning from Auburn University. And I've gotten the PDC from Jeff Lawton and from a place local to me in Florida, Grow Permaculture. And currently I'm in Jersey City, New Jersey, and I sit on the board of directors for two permaculture nonprofits. So I have a grassroots climate activist and community organizing background, and I've been doing regenerative design and landscape-based design and 3D modeling, graphic design for a few years now. So I came into the Web3 space via DeFi. I invested in Bitcoin, years ago. Didn't put in as much as I wanted to, just like everyone else. But now that there's these new tools and technology, I'm really seeing new pathways forward for regenerative design and this passion that I have for building a better planet. So the main thesis that we have is that real world assets are the next frontier for crypto. So real world assets on chain are going to enable new possibilities with DAOs and all these other dApps. Once you bring it on chain, because of the network effect, because of the composability, it's going to be, we aren't even able to imagine what's going to happen next. But it's really going to be bringing the real world on chain that's going to blow all of this up. And the second part of that is that it's specific to climate projects that we're going to be able to make a huge impact. I think if we just bring the traditional financial markets, traditional real estate, and put it all on chain, I think that'd be a huge mistake. I think we have a lot of ways to collaborate and build synergy around the people who want to make a difference and building the regenerative economic system that we need to using crypto. So there's new possibilities. We don't have to recreate the old system on crypto. So the mission and purpose of the public land protocol is breaking down by the three words. Public, it's a community-driven climate impact and planetary regeneration open source Web3 tools. So basically, like I was saying on the Twitter space, we're launching before we have a product market fit. This is based off an idea, a theory, and different ways that we can come together as a community to explore this. So the public land protocol is building a library of different tools for land stewards and people who are interested in these different topics to come together to build and design and to work together collaboratively. So the public land protocol is a community, it's a DAO community of designers, developers, and land stewards, creating a library of tools. So the different themes that we're interested to explore, and some of these we've gone down a little bit more than others, but in general, DAOs, the future of work, the ability to own, the networks that you participate in, it's a different relationship than being a consumer in Web 2. And then the direct democracy that's enabled through fully transparent, fully community controlled token communities. And like I was saying in the beginning, real world assets, bringing those on chain. Land trust law is something that we're really passionate about. How can DAOs that last, longer than perhaps a country or some other business might last, how can they have a regenerative impact on the ground in a lasting way? And then my background in permaculture design, I think that's the method for how we create these spaces on the ground, how we design ecosystems and human systems that work beneficially together. And then I'm really interested in not only, like a carbon project in the middle of the woods that no one can visit, but like, how do people come together in the space? What does an inclusive community look like? What does it look like to engage the people with the education about all of this? And so I think that's an interesting, the public realm. And then DeFi, the different tools that we can use with that and refi there are a lot of things that we can do with new carbon credits and other biodiversity credits and other types of things. Once we have a land steward, we can help them find those different tools. So one of the first things that we started doing is we're participating in the Sovereign Nature Initiative hackathon. And so one tool that we've been spending about a month on building is Orgo. So this is an app for landscape stewardship. So the public land protocol is a library of tools. This is just one that we've been working on. Basically, it's the idea that we can gamify what needs to happen on the ground to maintain the landscape, to build a regenerative system. So you can earn experience points and governance tokens and rewards for completing maintenance tasks on the ground, vote on proposals to build the eco-village, and purchase and collect NFTs representing tasks that you were a part of that got completed. So you can even do like retroactive public goods funding. It's kind of like the Pokemon Go for regenerative stewardship. So you can run around and find, oh, these, we need to do some weeding. Here's, 5 governance tokens that I can collect if I do this task. So we've had a lot of fun building this, and we're going to present this at the hackathon this weekend. And then one other thing that we've spent a little bit of time working on is the idea of tokenizing stewardship. This is the public land abundance token, still a work in progress. Everything's a work in progress. But really the idea of moving beyond carbon credits, how can we create a credit, a tokenized, commoditized DeFi token for regenerative stewardship as a whole? So we have the holistic ecosystem and community health rated by the biocompatible design standards that's developed by the Institute for Integrated Regenerative Design. So it's a set of 21 different principles across 3 categories that we can grade a land project for how efficient and optimized it is for the water cycle, the nutrient cycle, for biodiversity and habitat, for inclusive, equitable communities and social justice, all sorts of factors of holistic health, going way beyond carbon. And it seems like we'll be able to do this using a basket of eco credits on the region network, but it's a work in progress. So the idea is you would have an individual property owner that they could come in. We would help them tokenize their property, bring their assets on chain, develop a community treasury. So it's a community owned piece of land. It could be a very diverse types of properties could be considered: conservancies, private homesteading land, farms, public parks, recreative trails, and just like undeveloped raw land, problem areas land. And then basically we will use the rating system to assign the plat token to each land steward. And so that new token that we create will go straight to land stewards directly with no middlemen, so that they can benefit from the work that they're doing to create holistic, whole, healthy ecosystems and communities. And then other potential outputs that I think are possible that we want to work on is just building the community itself, finding the types of events, jobs, and creating content around these theories, these ideas, this community, this way of looking at regenerative finance. The public land protocol treasury, as we build different tools and find grant money, hackathon prize money, angel investors, as we grow money that we have, we will be able to come together as a community to invest in different, make an impact where we like. We want to open source everything that we're doing. One thing we are exploring is hiring a lawyer to make sure we can have these SEC exempt governance tokens of real world assets. And we're in a really specific place that like some of the other people that are doing like traditional real estate, like Propi or Centrifuge or Materium, these other different people, you have a lot of trouble with the SEC because that governance token represents the equity of the land. But in our case, the people who are directing control of the land are all on board with not even owning the land, that this land is going to exist forever in perpetuity. So we feel confident that we can, get around some of that and offer something to the DeFi community. And then there's some other things here. I mean, one thing we looked into is a getting a pro vault from the GDAO, having 0 interest loans for land stewards. So basically a loan that they don't need to have a payment schedule to pay back, really flexible to develop a climate project or other impact project. You can have a longer time frame vision of how you're gonna get the yield from what you're doing. Some of these projects can take 5-10 years to really get off the ground. And then, the marketplace. So once we're bringing these communities onto, helping to tokenize their land, helping to build DAOs out of them, we want to help to create the marketplace where they can, buy and sell these other different governance tokens. So like a draft idea for the roadmap, some next steps moving forward. As I said, we're starting first with the community. So before we have a product, before we have everything figured out, we're starting with you guys, building these relationships, building the DAO, building in public, sharing what we're doing, and it's flexible and it might change. So that's number one. And right now we're at number 2, which is launching the Proto Token. So by the end of the month, we will have a token, and I'm going to share a little bit more on the next slide. But going forward, we're going to continue to raise funds through grants. There's multiple grants that we're looking at right now, and hackathon prizes, angel investors, and NFT launch. We're talking with an artist about what that might look like for us. Purchasing our first protocol-owned property. We really like to have a demonstration of what we're doing. I think that'll really signal to the rest of Twitter and Refi that we are working on something. And then investing in the ecosystem and growth. So that library of tools, developing out the Orgo app to a more refined place, getting it fully functional. And we're talking about trying to start it in New York, probably first. That's where I'm based. That's where Jolly's based, who's been active since the beginning. And then the last thing is just continue to onboard the land stewards and growing this marketplace of these different tools and how they work together. So on to the token. So basically, we are launching a Proto Token. We are going to go live with the token before the end of the month. It's called Contributor Reward Public Land Protocol Governance Token. So it's CRPLP, purple. It's the purple PLP. So you can only earn this through being a contributor at the DAO. And I am starting at 0. So there's no one that owns any of this today. People who sign up to be a contributor, we're all going to share in the rewards of this. So over time, the number of hours you work in a week, by the end of the month, we're going to distribute the purple governance token to those contributors. And then eventually it's going to be redeemable for the true PLP governance token, which may or may not, it's yet to be seen how we're going to design and develop that. But the main thing is that you have a share of the future earnings potential of the public land protocol. So the different grant money and angel investor money that we're working on raising, the contributors, it's a worker-owned DAO. So the people who are helping to build this space are going to share in that yield. And it's a governance token, so voting and control. So this is the link to apply to be a contributor. There's also, if you don't know that you have time to be a contributor, we have options for like 5 hours a week, 10 hours a week, 20 hours a week. It's very flexible, and it's still really informal. We're still working out how exactly all of this stuff works. So we're excited to do it with you. But if you don't know about being a contributor, just sign up for the email updates and you'll know when there's like a public token launch that you can purchase. So it's publiclandprotocol.com.